Hey everyone, hope you've been doing well, not going too crazy being stuck inside for so long. So I just wanted to go over some stuff today. I was really impressed with all the photographs you submitted last week. A lot of you were really creative, and I was really proud of you for coming up with some really beautiful and creative shots with not the fanciest equipment, just our phones, but still had really, really cool results. So I was really happy to see that. So today I wanted to go over how to look at photographs and know that it's a good exposure level. It's not too bright, it's not too dark, and to avoid like overexposure and underexposure. And then go into this cool app that I found called Snapseed and do some editing. So I'm going to show you that too. So I thought it'd just be easy to do a screen recording and show you what to do with that. So first things first, gonna show you some examples of correct exposure levels just to know what to aim for when you're editing your black and white photos, how much contrast to put in it, how to avoid overexposed areas, things like that. So let's open this up. Okay, so 3 examples I threw on the opening page here were all Vivian Maier photographs, and you guys know her. We watched a documentary on her life, which was really cool. She was a nanny her whole life and also photographed people while she was out and about with children, which many adults didn't realize that she photographed. She kept it really secret, but she had really, really beautiful portraits, and she had a great sense of lighting, so that's why I threw on her examples here. I think they all have really nice lighting. You can see there's no overexposed, like really white areas. There's no complete loss of detail in the shadows. Just a really nice value, a range of values in there as well. So those are some good examples to look at. Really, really beautiful lighting. Okay, so according to Canon's website, correct exposure is having combination of settings between your aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Sorry, let me rephrase that. The act of having correct exposure means your combinations of settings between aperture, shutter speed, and ISO have perfectly exposed image, so nothing's blown out in the highlights or lost in the shadows of an image. There can still be highlights and shadows, obviously, but a perfectly exposed one doesn't lose details in that. So here's an example on the right. There's an example of overexposed, so it's a little bit bright. You can see that the highlights there, you don't get a whole lot of detail out of it, and it's just kind of overall too bright. The correctly exposed in the middle, you can see there is a good level of values in that, and then the underexposed, you can see it just has a little bit too darkness to it. So there's a visual example of overexposed and underexposed. Overexposed example, so the details are lost in the face. A good sense of whether your photo is overexposed is if you can fix it or not in Photoshop. And you can see, based on how bright her face is right here, that you cannot fix that in Photoshop. It's just no details to it whatsoever, so you can't just drag the highlight like bar down to get more detail out of it. That's just gone, so you can't really fix that. You'd have to fix it when you took the photograph. Here's an example of underexposed. There's no real detail in the horse's faces. That's kind of lost in the shadow. Just a little too dark, so it's underexposed. So Ansel Adams, you may have heard of him or not, but he's one of the most famous photographers in the world, early 20th century, and he was really into landscape photography, and he was a huge environmentalist, one of the first to like advocate for the land and national parks, things like that. So he's a really cool dude. He was known for his stunning compositions and beautiful exposure levels, so he's really well known in the photography world. He was also really well known for having just really, really beautiful exposure levels. You can see here there's detail in everything. The sky isn't overexposed. There's details in the shadow, but he still gets a range from white to black somehow. It's just really beautiful work. Here's some more examples of his work. You can see high contrast, but still nothing in the photograph is overexposed or underexposed. And another example here, again, really beautiful details, not too bright, not too dark, but still a range from white to black in your values. And another example. I threw in Sally Mann too. I thought of her. She is a famous photographer as well in the late 20th century, maybe like the 1980s-ish. She captured a lot of photographs in her home state of Virginia, just kind of like summertime in Virginia, really beautiful, almost like nostalgic photographs, and she had a really beautiful sense of lighting and exposure as well. You can see here, there's lots of details in the landscape here, and lots of values ranging from light to dark, but still nothing is way too dark, nothing's way too bright. And again, Vivian Maier threw some more in the end of here. She had a really nice eye for lighting as well. So some of her work here, you can see examples of good exposure levels. Okay. So I'm going to throw that slideshow on Schoology so you can look through those examples again if you need to, but I just wanted to walk you through some of the works that I thought had good levels of values, nothing that is too bright or too dark. Let me get out of here somehow. Okay. So if you haven't already, download Snapseed, this app right here, from the app portal. If you don't have it already, it's pretty cool. You get really in-depth editing for a free app, which is awesome. So we're gonna go ahead and open that up, and it just says tap anywhere to open a photo. And I'm gonna open it from my device. And here's a photo I took in black and white using the rule of thirds composition. So go ahead and open up one of those photos that you took last week, one of the composition ones. So when you first open it up, you can see there's all these kind of filters, almost like if you were to throw one of these photos in Instagram. There's all these ones you can go through. But honestly, I'm not a big fan of filters. I think that you guys are all talented enough to make your own filters, and each photograph has its own special kind of formula that it needs to look good. So I don't filters just kind of are trying to be a one-size-fits-all, that it really depends on what lighting situation was in your photograph. It just has a lot of different variants to it. So let's see. I am just gonna forget the filters and just showing you where that is. So if you hit tools, you can get much more detailed than those filters there. I was gonna show you just a few because there are a ton of them here, and I'm sure you don't want to listen to me talk about each of these little things in detail, and a lot of them honestly are just very straightforward, kind of tap it and just figure out what it does. But some ones that I wanted to point out were the tune image in the top left corner. So you can hit the adjust button right here and go through. You can change the brightness of it by holding your finger up at the top here and just kind of like moving this bar to the right or to the left. Okay, so I'm going to go back to 0 because I don't want to just do that just yet. Contrast, again, just move it to the right or left. Actually, I have a little too much contrast in this photo. So when I took this with my iPhone, that's a pretty tricky shot for an iPhone to get, because you got this bright outside light happening versus this dark inside light. So it's a huge contrast, which if you even use auto mode on a camera, it just struggles to get that difference. It doesn't know whether it should be dark because it's a bright window, or if it should be lighter because it's also dark from inside, so it gets confused. So this was a tricky shot, a lot of high contrast because it didn't really know how to deal with it. So that's why using manual cameras is handy, because you can set the settings yourself when you know what to do with it. Anyway, I want to get rid of some of the contrast. It's a little too high contrast right now. So I'm going to go in the negatives a little bit there. Saturation is how colorful it is, which doesn't apply because we're doing black and white. Let's see, ambiance. Looks like it brightens it up or really darkens it. I'm just gonna add a touch of that. Highlights, need to darken those highlights a little bit. It's a little too intense with that window there. Shadows, now there's a little bit too much shadow going on with the cactus there. So I'm gonna lighten the shadows. There. I'm gonna go back and add some darkness to the shadows because I do like a high contrast, but I'll show you another tool before that. Okay, and warmth is adding like yellow tone to your photograph, which doesn't apply here either because it's black and white. Okay, we did all that. Now just gonna hit the check mark in the bottom right. Okay, and if you hold down with your finger the photograph, you'll see before and then after what I did editing. So you can see that high contrast to less contrast. You can get more detail out of the cactus now, which is what I was going for. Okay, some more tools. Details is kind of nice. It's similar to clarity on the Camera Raw on our computers in the computer lab. Basically adds just more structure to it. If you add too much, it can look a little crazy, a little too intense. So I just like to just add a little touch of it. Unless the photograph you want to be like more soft and kind of like fuzzy, you can take a little structure away from it. So I'm just gonna give it a little bump, just a little clarity to it, and hit the check mark. And again, you can hold your finger down and check what you've done to edit it so far. Okay, just a few more. Let's see that I want to get into today. Oh, selective. That one is really cool. Makes this app stand out apart from other free ones. So you can, it's kind of like selection tools in Photoshop. You can tap a specific area. So I'm going to tap the cactus. And you can adjust the brightness of that, like just that area. So just the cactus. I'm going to edit right now so I can make it brighter if I wanted to, or darker. Maybe like, I want some detail out of it, but a little bit more shadow to it. Okay. And then I can hit the check mark to add that. Oops, I went out of it completely. Let me go back to selective. And this like area of the sky is a little overexposed, so I'm gonna tap that and darken it a little bit so it's not too distracting. So it's really nice about selecting parts of the area of a photograph to edit and change the brightness. That's nice. So you can see high contrast, kind of overexposed in the outside area before I started editing, and I kind of toned it down a bit. All right. Now, that was selective. A few more I wanted to show you. Let's see. If you're into the vintage look, you can add grain to it. Back in the day, film had silver grains in it. So that's where the term graininess comes from. You get this like silver grain effect, but I think that's not really necessary because it's not a film photograph, but that's cool if you're like trying to go for that film aesthetic. You could do that. Let's see. What else? Oh, there was one more I wanted to go over, lens blur. So you can kind of fake that effect of aperture of that blurred background if you like that effect. It's a pretty popular effect with photographs, so you can kind of fake it here. So this middle ring right here, well, the blue dot, you move it to like what you want to be in focus, and then stretch the middle ring to fit the object that you want in focus. So I'm going to stretch it to this cactus here. If you hit the adjust button here, you can adjust how blurry it is. Like if you want it to be extreme blur or not so much. I'm just going to do a little bit of blur, not too much. Too much might look fake, and you don't want it to look fake. Okay. The transition is this outer ring here. So you can make it transition like really slowly to blur, or you can make it transition pretty quickly. I'm gonna do like a in between, maybe like right there, and see what that looks like. And then vignette strength. Basically, vignette is like dark corners, so you can move it and get darker corners if you want to. I don't want too much though. Okay, let's see how that looks. Okay, looks pretty good. So here is my before, and here is my after. So I changed the brightness in the window. I brought some detail out of the shadow of the cactus, and I added like a blur effect to make it look like I have a shallow depth of field. If anyone remembers, the aperture creates this blurred effect, and with a wide opening, like when your aperture inside the lens is wide open, it gets that blurred effect, which would be like an f-stop, like 1.4 or something like that. The higher the f-stop number goes, the more focused your photograph is. All right, so it's just kind of fun, a lot of different tools you can use. When you're done with it, you go to export, you can save it, and it will save to your photo gallery. And you can hit modify, so it's successfully saved. You can also share it or export it. Create a JPEG with permanent changes to it. Okay. And then from there, you could upload it to Schoology because it'll just be on your camera roll. All right. So I thought for Tuesday and Wednesday of this week, you could work on editing those 9 pictures that you turned in last week, the 9 pictures with the different composition types. You took it all in black and white, so now I thought you could go in and edit them. So edit each one, make sure the shadows aren't too dark or too extreme, make sure that overexposed areas you can darken a little bit, maybe have fun with it and play with blurring it and playing with other things, and creating just a nice exposed photograph is the goal for this week. So just message me if you have any questions. I'll try and help as best as I can, and I hope that you guys have a good week.